Jared never liked working on alien armor. The metals were strange, the wiring was half-living, and the energy pulsed like a heartbeat. But it was his job. As one of the few humans trusted aboard the Zithian fleet, he had no choice but to keep doing it. The Zathians were warriors born from a world of storms and molten seas. Their armor was an extension of their own bodies, not just technology, but a living second skin. That afternoon, the repair bay was quiet except for the hum of plasma welders and the deep vibration of the engines. Jared stood alone beside the examination table, where Commander Sarix's armor rested like a sleeping beast. It shimmered faintly in the sterile light, its silver surface flowing with faint lines of energy. She stood nearby, tall and imposing, her eyes cold as the steel around her. Her presence alone could silence an entire room of soldiers. He had seen her only a few times before, usually during fleet briefings. She never spoke to humans unless it was absolutely necessary. Yet today she had called for him specifically. No one knew why. Jared adjusted his gloves and approached the armor. "Commander, the diagnostics show a destabilized field near the core. Probably from the last skirmish," he said, keeping his voice calm. Sarix didn't move. "Do what you must," she replied. Her voice was deep but soft, the kind that carried command even without effort. Jared began working, his tools moving with careful precision. The Zithian armor wasn't built with bolts or panels like human tech. It moved like liquid metal, shifting open when the right pressure points were touched. As the surface unfolded, a warm pulse ran through the air. He frowned. "That's strange. The inner matrix is still alive?" "It should be," she said simply. "It bonds to me. It never sleeps." He hesitated, then continued. The armor responded to his movements like it was watching him. Every time his hand neared a certain spot near the chest plate, the energy flickered. He was about to stabilize a glowing circuit line when Sarix suddenly hissed. "Careful," she said sharply. He froze. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." Her silver eyes narrowed. "You almost touched the lock," he blinked. "The lock?" Her gaze didn't waver. "That mark there," she said, nodding toward a faint circular pattern etched into the metal. "Do not touch it. It isn't for protection." The way she said it made him pause. "Not for protection? What else could it be?" He forced a small laugh. "Right. Won't touch anything you don't tell me to." She said nothing, but the warning in her eyes lingered. Jared went back to work, though now every movement felt heavier. He focused on the damaged energy channel instead, carefully adjusting the regulators. The armor vibrated faintly under his hands, almost as if it was breathing. Minutes passed in silence. He tried to ignore her gaze, but he could feel her watching every motion. When he replaced the last conductor, the armor let out a soft hum and sealed itself again. He stepped back, wiping his hands on his uniform. "It should be stable now," he said, "but I'd recommend resting the armor for a cycle before you use it again." Sarix looked at the repaired suit, then at him. "Rest is not an option." He smiled faintly. "Didn't think so." She took a step forward, her hand brushing across the armor's surface. The lines of energy brightened under her touch like veins awakening. The armor rippled and molded itself around her body, sealing in perfect synchronization. Jared had seen many Zithians don their armor before, but this was different. The air changed. The lights dimmed. A low hum filled the room, then she turned toward him. "Your touch changed it," he blinked. "What do you mean?" "The armor responded to you," she said quietly. "It should not have done that. It knows me alone. Maybe the circuits misread the biosignal?" he suggested, but even as he said it, he wasn't sure. The look in her eyes wasn't confusion. It was recognition of something she didn't want to admit. "Impossible," she said finally. "This armor was crafted from my own bloodline's resonance. It should reject you." "Well," he said with an awkward shrug, "I'm hard to reject." Her gaze softened, just for a heartbeat. "Human humor," she murmured, almost to herself. "Always where it doesn't belong." He smiled slightly. "Helps us survive." The moment passed. She turned away, the energy fading from her armor. "You may go," she said, her voice back to its usual coldness. He nodded and began packing his tools. As he turned to leave, he noticed something. The faint lock symbol she had warned him about was glowing softly now. "It hadn't done that before, Commander," he said, pointing. "That lock—" "Leave it," she interrupted sharply. "It's not your concern." He hesitated but obeyed. Still, as he walked out of the bay, the image of that faint glow stayed in his mind. He had worked on dozens of Zithian armors and none had reacted to him before. There was something alive in that suit, something she didn't want him to understand. Hours later, Jared sat in the crew mess, stirring his coffee while other engineers laughed around him. But his thoughts were far from light. He kept replaying her words. This isn't for protection. Protection from what? Or for what? He had seen her in battle once. The way her armor shimmered as plasma fire hit it was like watching a storm break on glass. She was unstoppable, but if that armor wasn't just protection, what was it holding in? Before he could think further, the ship trembled violently. The lights flickered, alarms blared. He jumped up. What now? Enemy contact! Someone shouted. Unknown fleet, 3 cruisers approaching from the dark side of the moon. Jared rushed toward the engineering bay as red emergency lights painted the halls. The sound of distant explosions shook the deck. Through a viewport, he saw streaks of blue light crossing space, the Xythian fleet firing back. When he reached the bay, Syrinx was already there, her armor shining like liquid fire. She turned as he entered, eyes fierce. You shouldn't be here, she said. I'm not letting the main reactor blow because someone scratched your armor wrong, he said, forcing a grin. For a second she almost smiled. Then her gaze hardened again. You are brave. Or foolish. Both, he said. Mostly foolish. The floor shook again. System sparked. Main stabilizers offline, someone reported over the comms. Syrinx pressed a hand to her chest plate, the place where the lock was. The glow brightened again, faint but growing. Her expression darkened. What's wrong? Jared asked. The seal is reacting, she whispered. This battle. It stirs the energy. Seal? You said it wasn't for protection. What does it seal? She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, something that must never awaken. Before he could ask more, the ship lurched violently. A blast tore through the hull above them. Sparks rained down. Jared stumbled, catching himself on a console. Syrinx stood unmoving, her armor absorbing debris like it was nothing. She touched the glowing mark again. If this vessel falls, the seal will not hold. You must leave. Not happening, he said, shaking his head. I'm not running from this ship. Her eyes glimmered faintly, the coldness fading. You are not like the others. Neither are you, he said quietly. Something flickered in her gaze, something almost human. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice. If you see the armor open, you must not come near. Do you understand? He wanted to ask why, but her tone made it clear. This was not a warning to question. It was a command to survive. All right, he said softly. I understand. The ship's comm system crackled again. Commander Syrinx, enemy boarding pods inbound. They're cutting through the hull. Syrinx's armor brightened until the entire room glowed with pale light. Stay behind me, she ordered. Jared watched as the first explosion tore through the far bulkhead. Alien invaders poured through. Dark shapes with glowing eyes, weapons crackling with energy. Syrinx moved like lightning. Her armor absorbed every shot, her blade cutting through their ranks with terrifying grace. Jared ducked behind a console, firing an emergency barrier. The air was filled with smoke and energy fire. Through it, he saw Syrinx fight, each movement sharp, deliberate, powerful. But between those strikes, the lock on her chest glowed brighter with every blow she took. When the last enemy fell, the room went still. Syrinx stood among the wreckage, breathing hard. Jared approached carefully. Commander, your armor? She looked down. The glow from the lock was now pulsing, steady and strong. It's waking, she said under her breath. What's waking? The reason this armor was made. He didn't understand, but he saw fear in her eyes for the first time. Not fear of battle, not fear of death, but fear of what was inside her own armor. Get to safety, she said. He shook his head. I'm not leaving. You don't understand, human, she said, voice trembling slightly. If this continues, I won't be able to stop it. She turned away, walking toward the damaged corridor, her armor glowing like molten light. Jared followed her to the doorway. Syrinx, he called out. Tell me what's going on. She stopped but didn't look back. You almost touched the lock earlier, she said softly. If you had, you would have seen it too. Seen what? He asked. She turned slightly, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The thing we keep sleeping inside us. The thing that destroyed our world once. Then she walked into the flickering corridor, disappearing into the smoke. Jared stood frozen. The alarms wailed, the ship shook again, but he couldn't move. Her words echoed in his head. The lock wasn't for protection, it was a seal. And somehow, when he touched it earlier, it had recognized him. He didn't know what it meant yet, but deep down he could feel it. Whatever was sealed inside that armor was waking up. And now it knew his touch. The lights on the Zithian flagship flickered as another explosion rocked the hull. Sirens howled through the corridors. The metallic floor shook beneath Jared's boots as he ran after Commander Syrinx, weaving through smoke and falling debris. The air smelled of ozone and burning circuits. "Commander," he shouted. "Wait!" Her tall form was ahead of him, silver armor gleaming under the red emergency lights. The lock at her chest glowed brighter with every step she took. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and the energy from it buzzed through the air, making the metal walls tremble. She turned slightly, her voice sharp but shaken. "You shouldn't have followed me, human." "Yeah, well, I don't take orders very well," he said, catching up beside her. "Tell me what's happening." "The ship's losing power. The reactors are unstable, and now your armor looks like it's about to explode." Her gaze turned toward him, calm but heavy. "It is not exploding," she said softly. "It's awakening." Jared frowned. "Awakening what?" "The thing my people sealed long ago," she said, walking faster. "The thing our ancestors bound inside this armor so that it could never rise again." He felt a chill crawl down his back. "You mean there's something alive in your armor?" "Not alive," she said. "Not in the way you understand. It is energy with purpose, a weapon made of thought and rage." She led him into a large chamber filled with flickering consoles. The walls were lined with power conduits, all sparking under the strain. She placed her hand on one of the terminals. Data symbols in Zithian script streamed across the screen. "The enemy ships are closing in," Jared said, reading the display. "If they hit the engines again, we'll lose orbit." Syrinx didn't respond immediately. The light from the armor reflected off her face, making her expression unreadable. "This is no longer a normal battle," she said quietly. "They came for me, not the fleet." "What do you mean?" Her eyes met his. "They know the seal is weakening. They can sense it." "The same way you did." He blinked, confused. "I didn't sense anything." "You did," she said. "When you touched the lock during repairs. The armor responded to you. It should not have done that unless it recognized a compatible pattern. You are not Zithian, yet it reached for you." Jared shook his head. "I just fixed the circuits." "That's all?" "No," she said firmly. "You connected with it. You gave it something it was missing, human resonance. That's why it's waking now." Before Jared could reply, another explosion shook the ship. The console sparked and the chamber filled with smoke. "Bridges compromised." A voice shouted through the comms. "Multiple breaches. Commander, we need..." The signal cut off with static. Syrinx straightened. "They're here." A sharp hiss came from the corridor. The metal door buckled outward as a blast tore it apart. Dozens of enemy warriors flooded in, dark armored figures with glowing red visors. They fired plasma rounds into the room. Syrinx reacted instantly. A wave of golden light erupted from her chestplate, forming a shield around them. The bolt struck the barrier and dissolved into harmless sparks. The glow from the lock brightened even more. "Syrinx," Jared shouted over the noise. "That shield, what's it doing to you?" "Draining me," she said, her voice strained. "But I must hold it. You'll kill yourself." She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward, her blade forming from her armor's arm like liquid metal turning into a sword. In one swift motion, she cut through the front line of enemies, each swing releasing bursts of golden light. Jared covered his face from the heat. When the last of the attackers fell, Syrinx dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. The armor's glow dimmed and then pulsed again, faster than before. "Commander," Jared said, rushing to her side. "We need to get you to medbay." "No," she whispered. "It's too late. The lock is breaking." He stared at the center of her armor. The circular mark she had warned him about was now cracked with streams of golden energy leaking out. "What happens if it breaks?" Her voice trembled for the first time. "The entity will be free. It will destroy everything in its path." "Then we have to stop it," Jared said. "There is no way to stop it," she replied weakly, "only to contain it again. But I cannot do that alone." He hesitated. "You said it responded to me. Maybe I can help." Her eyes widened. "If you try, it could kill you." He smiled faintly. "Could, but maybe it won't." Syrinx looked at him for a long moment. "Humans," she whispered. "You never understand the meaning of fear." "Maybe that's why we survive," he said. The ship shook again. The deck cracked beneath them. Systems were failing everywhere. Jared could feel the heat from the armor spreading through the floor like fire. He reached out his hand. Tell me what to do. Cyrix hesitated, then nodded slowly. Place your hand over the lock. If the armor accepts you again, it will share the burden. But you must not pull away, no matter what you feel. Got it, he said. He placed his palm against the glowing circle. The moment his skin touched it, the light flared violently. The room disappeared. Jared gasped as his mind filled with visions. Stars collapsing, endless storms, screams in languages he didn't know. He saw a massive creature of light and shadow, writhing within a cage of energy. Its voice thundered inside his skull. Free me. He clenched his teeth, refusing to let go. No, he said through gritted breath. Stay where you belong. The entity roared in his mind, the sound shaking his bones. Cyrix's voice reached him faintly, echoing through the storm. Hold on, you're containing it. He forced his mind to focus on her voice. The pain was unbearable, but he held on. Slowly, the energy began to settle, its violent pulse softening. The glow around them dimmed until the armor's surface turned smooth again. When Jared opened his eyes, he was on the floor. His head throbbed and his vision swam. Cyrix stood over him, her armor cracked but stable. She looked exhausted but alive. You did it, she said softly. It's sealed again. He laughed weakly. Glad to help. She knelt beside him, touching his shoulder. No human has ever endured that connection. You shared the burden. You bound the entity to both of us, he frowned. Both of us? She nodded. If either of us dies, the seal will break again. We are linked now. He stared at her, realizing what that meant. Guess we're partners then. A faint smile touched her lips. In a way. Suddenly the comms crackled back to life. Commander Cyrix, enemy ships are retreating. They're pulling back from orbit. Cyrix stood slowly, her strength returning. They sense the seal stabilize. They know they failed. Jared looked out the viewport. The enemy vessels were indeed pulling away, vanishing into the blackness of space. For the first time in hours, the ship grew still. He leaned back against the wall, breathing deeply.
So what happens now?
Cyrix turned to him. Now I train you. He blinked. Train me? You carry part of the seal now, she said. If you cannot control it, the entity will feed on your energy and awaken again. Jared groaned. And here I thought my engineering job was dangerous. Her eyes softened slightly. You saved this ship. You saved my people. That makes you more than an engineer. He smiled faintly. Guess I'm getting promoted then. For the first time, she actually laughed, a quiet, genuine sound that echoed faintly in the damaged chamber. Days passed. The ship's repairs began and the crew returned to their duties. Jared spent most of his time in the medical bay recovering. Yet sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could still feel that golden energy flickering in his chest as if something inside him was breathing. Cyrix visited often. She never said much, but she always stood nearby, watching him with those calm silver eyes. One evening, she said softly, When the seal bound to you, it changed color. The energy has adapted to human rhythm now. You are the first of your kind to touch it and live. Lucky me, he said. Not luck, she said. Choice. He looked at her, studying the faint cracks in her armor. You risked everything to stop that thing. Why? Her expression turned distant. Because my ancestors released it once before. It destroyed our home world. We became nomads because of our own creation. This armor was built to contain it, and every generation someone must bear the burden. And now it's both of us, Jared said quietly. She nodded. It seems fate wanted it that way. There was a long silence between them. Then Jared grinned. So, does this mean I outrank some of your soldiers now? Cyrix raised an eyebrow. Do not test your luck, human, he laughed. Just checking. She smiled faintly, then turned toward the viewport. The stars drifted slowly past, shining across her armor. You asked me once what the lock was for, she said softly. Now you know. It was never meant to protect me. It was meant to protect the galaxy. And now, he said, standing beside her, we both do. She looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting the stars. Perhaps humans were meant to come among us after all. You bring balance to chaos even when you don't mean to. Or maybe we just break things until they start working again, he said with a grin. For a moment she was silent. Then she said quietly, Whatever the reason, I am glad you touched the lock. He chuckled. You and me both, Commander. Outside the viewport, the stars shone brighter, and the great ship sailed silently through the dark, carrying within it two unlikely souls bound by one secret, an ancient power, sealed not just by technology but by trust. And though neither of them said it aloud, both knew that as long as they stood together, the thing inside that armor would never wake again.